Well, in another breaking news that we are tracking for you at this hour, the U.S. military has released a video that shows strikes on Iran's ballistic missiles sites. Sharing the video, the U.S. Central Command said the Iranian regime's reckless use and proliferation of ballistic missiles have been a dangerous threat for decades. Now, at the president's direction, U.S. forces are eliminating the same threat. Earlier, the U.S. military said it had destroyed the headquarters of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The IRGC is tasked with preserving the state and which has the key influence in the country's economics and politics. The U.S. Central Command also said America has the most powerful military on earth and the IRGC no longer has a headquarters. In a fact sheet shared by the command, the U.S. military claimed that over 1,000 Iranian targets had been struck in the first 24 hours of Operation Epic Fury. It listed the U.S. military assets used in the operation, which included stealth bombers, drones, fighter jets and anti-missile systems. It also listed Iranian targets, which included command and control centers, ballistic missile sites and the joint headquarters of IRGC. Now, this is the breaking news we are getting in for you as of this hour. And for more on this, we are being joined by senior scholar at the National Institute for Public Policy, Robert Joseph from Washington, D.C. Well, thank you so much, Robert, for joining us today.
Well, thank you for the invitation.
Right. With the death of Ayatollah Khomeini and the rise of a new interim council, is the D.C. consensus that Iran's command structure is truly broken, or have we simply triggered a more radical and unpredictable phase of the IRGC's shadow command?
Well, let me just say, first of all, that the conflict that is unfolding today is a consequence of Iran not willing to negotiate in good faith its nuclear weapon program. The president made every effort to have a diplomatic or negotiated outcome. He even, I am told, offered free for the life of the reactor nuclear fuel. The Iranians said no. The Iranians wanted to continue their nuclear weapons program. They wanted to reconstitute the ability to enrich. And the president was left with a choice. You can confront Iran now, before it has a nuclear weapon, or later, after it has a nuclear weapon. And that is a choice that, and what you see now is the choice that the president made. This is a pariah regime. It is a regime that has terrorized the region, is the chief sponsor of international terror. It has undertaken incredibly brutal and repressive measures against its own people, including in this past December and January, reports of over 30,000 protesters mowed down in the streets. So that's the regime we're dealing with. I think that the strikes have clearly decapitated the leadership of Iran, both its political leadership, its religious leadership, and its military leadership. I know that the headquarters of the IRGC have been hit, the headquarters of the MOIS, their intelligence community has been hit, and the military targets. So I would assume that the command and control is in complete chaos.
Right, and Robert, President Trump launched Operation Epic Fury without congressional approval, but we now have 3 U.S. service members killed in action. Well, how is the administration managing the legal and political backlash on Capitol Hill as the risk of a protracted war grows?
Well, I think the first priority, of course, is to achieve the objectives of the military conflict, and that's what their attention is focused on. This is not the first president to use force overseas to protect American interests. And he won't be the last one. I think a lot of the criticism that you're hearing stems more from Trump derangement syndrome than it does actually from the constitutional question of when and where the president can use force.
Right, and the president mentioned this could last up to 4 weeks, and usually the War Powers Resolution 60-day clock is the focus. But with the fatalities already on the board, is the DC consensus shifting towards requiring a formal authorization for use of military force to avoid a constitutional crisis at home? Is that the case?
Well, I wouldn't anticipate a constitutional crisis in any case. And I would just say that every time a president, not just this president, but past presidents, and there have been many examples, have used force like this, there's always an effort, and it's understandable, on Capitol Hill to register either discontent or register concern about the constitutional aspects of this. But I think that past precedents have been clear that the president does have the constitutional authority to conduct these strikes.
Right, and Iran is now striking U.S. partners like the UAE, for example, and Saudi Arabia to retaliate for our presence there, for their presence actually. Is there a quiet fear in Washington that these allies might opt for neutrality to stop the bombardment effectively, isolating United States forces in the region? Do you think that?
Well, I think just the opposite. I think that Iran has grossly miscalculated, and that the Gulf states and the others, and it's not just in the Gulf states, but the other states, Arab and non-Arab, that Iran has struck, will now be much more sympathetic to the need to finally eliminate this very disruptive force in the region. I mean, again, Iran has exported terrorism for 47 years. And the Gulf states have often been the target of Iranian aggression. And they are also vulnerable in the context of the export of fundamentalist Islam, the brand of Islam that the Ayatollah was pushing across the region.
Right, and while the military focuses on Tehran, there is a massive intelligence concern in Washington, D.C. regarding Iran's asymmetric reach. Given our current domestic political climate, how high is the concern within the Beltway that Iran will respond with large-scale cyber attacks on U.S.?
Well, I think there is that concern, and clearly it is a real concern. But I think our Department of Homeland Security, our intelligence community, the entire national security structure of the United States is focused on preventing just such cyber attacks.
Right, and the UAE has already withdrawn its ambassador and has closed its embassy. If the Gulf states decide that the price of protection, being an Iranian missile target, is too high, well, could we see a sudden move towards neutrality? Because that's, again, the question that we asked before, like neutrality that forces the US to operate solely from carrier strike groups rather than regional bases.
Well, military conflicts like revolutions are very messy things. And there's often a great deal of information and even more misinformation in the so-called fog of war. I don't know the answer to your question. I don't know that there is an answer to your question. We'll have to see how things develop. But right now, as I said, I believe the Iranian regime has grossly miscalculated. And the Gulf states and others are much more likely to join into the fight than they are to move toward neutrality.
Right, Robert. And, recently we just got to know that Rubio and top US officials are to make Iran case to Congress today. Well, what is your view on that? How is President Trump's government going to talk about the case, the war, how it started?
Well, as you know, before becoming Secretary of State, Senator Rubio was in the Hill for a good number of years and a very important member of the Foreign Affairs Committee and other committees. And he clearly understands the importance of informing Congress, of keeping Congress informed of the administration's actions. And that is, I think, what should be done. I give him my full support in that.
Right. we are seeing a lot of things that are unfolding right now. What would you say about how UK has said yes for the United States to use their basis for retaliation attack, but are getting back out saying that we are not saying that we're not are involved in it. So what's your take on it?
Well, as you know, there's been for many, many years a special relationship with the UK. What we're looking at today is a very complex relationship. And I think that personally, I was disappointed that the UK Prime Minister would make an announcement that the UK is not at all involved in this, because the UK has been a staunch partner in everything we have done with regard to Iran in the past. I think for internal domestic reasons, he's playing to a different audience, quite frankly, and it's disappointing.
Right. Well, we are to wait and see what unfolds. Well, thank you so much, Robert Joseph, for joining us today and giving your insights on the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. You have a great day.